It was a cold night, the kind where the world felt eerily quiet, as if everyone had turned in early. I had just finished a late project and was making myself a cup of tea when I heard a faint noise coming from the kitchen. At first I thought it was just the house settling, but then I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. I paused, heart pounding as I peeked around the corner and saw a figure in the dimly lit kitchen. It was my neighbor's son, Jake. Jake, only a year younger than my daughter, was someone I had known for years. He'd grown up next door, and he'd always been friendly, maybe a little too friendly at times. But never did I imagine I'd find him standing there, in my kitchen, at midnight. "Jake?" I called out, my voice shaky from both surprise and confusion. He spun around, wide-eyed, his hand frozen mid-reach towards the fridge. "Oh, Mrs. Roberts, I didn't mean to startle you. I was just getting a glass of water." I could see his eyes dart nervously, and something didn't sit right. It was too late for someone to casually be getting water, especially in someone else's house. I stepped closer. "Jake, why are you in my house at this hour?" I asked, the weight of his unexplained presence sinking in. He hesitated, swallowing hard. There was an awkward silence before he mumbled, "I needed to talk." I wasn't sure who else to talk to. 1,000 thoughts rushed through my head, but one thought screamed louder than the rest. This wasn't about water. "Talk about what?" I asked, trying to stay calm. The air felt thick, heavy with tension, like the walls were closing in. He finally turned to face me, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's about my mom and dad. They've been fighting. A lot." I didn't know where else to go. His eyes were wet, his voice cracking. I saw the desperation in his face, the vulnerability that hit me in a way I wasn't prepared for. But something else lingered. Was that why he was here? Or was there something more? The guilt and unease in his demeanor suggested there was a deeper secret, one he wasn't ready to reveal. Then it all came crashing down. My mind wandered back to a conversation I had had with my husband earlier that week. He had mentioned something offhand about Jake's father, Greg, staying late at work on some important business, and how it seemed like he was avoiding his wife. I had brushed it off, but now I wasn't so sure. I pressed Jake further. "Jake, what are you really here for? You're not telling me everything." He sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. I don't know how to say this, but it's about my dad. I think he's been seeing someone else." My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" I asked, barely able to keep my voice steady. "I think my dad is having an affair," he blurted, his voice trembling. "I found some texts on his phone. They're not from my mom, and I don't know how to deal with it." The room felt like it was spinning. I could barely process what he was saying. My neighbor, my friend, Greg, was cheating on his wife? And Jake, struggling with this painful secret, had no one to confide in except me? I felt a knot form in my stomach. The confusion and sadness in Jake's eyes mirrored the pain I had seen countless times before in relationships plagued by lies and betrayal. I wanted to reach out to comfort him, but I couldn't help but feel the weight of his revelation. How had I not seen it sooner? And more importantly, how could I help him without crossing boundaries I didn't fully understand? As I stood there, uncertain of how to respond, I couldn't help but think about my own marriage. Was my husband hiding something? Was I blind to the signs of infidelity right under my nose? Jake left shortly after, but the air in the house was thick with questions, doubts, and unresolved emotions. The next morning, I couldn't shake the weight of his words. I had always prided myself on being a good neighbor, a good friend, but now I was caught in a web of secrets, lies, and emotional turmoil. And the hardest part was knowing that someone I trusted, someone I had been close to, was hiding a part of themselves from the world. I didn't know what to do next. Should I confront Greg? Should I tell my husband? Would I even be able to face Jake the next time I saw him? The complexity of human emotions and relationships never ceases to surprise me. The moment you think you know someone, the truth comes to light, and everything changes. The discovery of an unexpected presence in the kitchen at midnight is not just a simple plot twist, but a powerful trigger for exploring the deep emotional conflict that comes with betrayal. In relationships, moments of shock, especially those that reveal hidden truths, often expose the complexity of emotions and unspoken fears that had long been buried under the surface. When the neighbor's son is found in the protagonist's kitchen, it is a startling disruption in what should be a safe and familiar space. This discovery sets the stage for unraveling a deeper, more complicated reality, where trust is questioned and emotions quickly spiral into confusion, pain, and resentment. The physical act of finding someone in a personal space late at night is not just about the violation of privacy, but is symbolic of a deeper breach of emotional boundaries. The emotional conflict intensifies as the protagonist grapples with the shocking revelation. The idea of emotional attachment, whether to a family, a neighbor, or even a community, comes into sharp focus. The protagonist's first instinct is to protect and comfort, as most people would do when faced with a distressed young person. However, as the layers of the situation begin to unfold, it becomes evident that the visit is not as innocent as it seems. The very presence of Jake in the kitchen at midnight suggests a breach of trust, and in relationships affected by infidelity, trust becomes the most fragile of commodities. The discovery of Jake's secret turmoil, a young person confiding the emotional strain caused by his parents' deteriorating relationship, pushes the protagonist into a whirlwind of internal conflict. While the instinct to offer solace and guidance is strong, there is also an overwhelming sense of betrayal and disbelief at the magnitude of the emotional toll inflicted on everyone involved. As the story continues to develop, the complexity of the emotions becomes increasingly evident. Betrayal, particularly when it is not anticipated, often forces individuals to confront uncomfortable truths. In the case of Jake, his visit is a direct result of the emotional chaos caused by the infidelity of his father. The protagonist's immediate reaction is one of empathy, trying to understand the young man's emotional state and offer support. However, what starts as an emotional engagement soon begins to surface darker, unspoken questions. The protagonist is now faced with the possibility that the neighbor, a close friend, may have betrayed not only his spouse, but also his sense of community. This knowledge carries with it an enormous weight, the understanding that infidelity doesn't just affect the person involved in the act, but also ripples out, affecting the relationships of everyone surrounding them. The protagonist feels not only an emotional burden for Jake, but also the underlying tension of knowing that the neighbor's actions have shattered an unspoken trust between friends. The tension escalates further when the protagonist begins to question their own relationship. The experience of witnessing emotional betrayal forces a person to reevaluate their own interactions with others, particularly their spouse. The question of whether the protagonist's own marriage is as solid as it appears comes to the forefront. As Jake's revelation about his father's infidelity unfolds, the protagonist is left with an unsettling sense of uncertainty. The crisis that Jake is facing, one of unspoken emotional damage, is now mirrored in the protagonist's own relationship. Could there be secrets in their marriage as well? The emotional rollercoaster of feeling sympathy for Jake, anger at the betrayal of a neighbor, and confusion about one's own situation creates an environment of emotional turmoil where every connection becomes suspect. The bonds that were once perceived as secure and stable are now overshadowed by the pervasive uncertainty that infidelity brings into any relationship. Moreover, the emotional conflict within the story reveals the challenge of managing multiple emotional attachments. The protagonist is caught in a delicate balance, trying to maintain a supportive role for Jake while simultaneously processing the shock of the situation. The emotional strain of keeping a friend's secret while dealing with the weight of emotional loyalty and family ties can be overwhelming. This dilemma highlights how relationships, whether between neighbors, friends, or spouses, are rarely simple. People involved in emotionally charged situations often navigate a maze of conflicting feelings, where betrayal and loyalty, trust and doubt, love and resentment all blend together into a complex emotional landscape. The protagonist's internal struggle to remain supportive and neutral while also questioning the integrity of others reveals the uncomfortable truth that emotional attachment is never purely one-dimensional. Ultimately, this scenario lays bare how infidelity and emotional attachment often create an intricate web of feelings that cannot be easily untangled. Betrayal does not simply involve one person's actions, but has far-reaching consequences, disrupting relationships that once seemed stable and secure. The complicated emotions triggered by the discovery of a neighbor's son in the kitchen at midnight serve as a microcosm of how emotional conflicts can affect individuals on multiple levels. The shocking revelation not only tests the protagonist's emotional resilience, but also forces them to confront the fragile nature of trust in all forms of relationships. These emotional conflicts highlight how vulnerable people are when faced with the painful truth about the hidden layers of those they care about. The story becomes a powerful exploration of how betrayal, both seen and unseen, can lead to profound emotional challenges that test the limits of trust, attachment, and human connection.